Undefeated Iowa State, undefeated Purdue. It might be the game of the year this Saturday, and we have a college crossover.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into a special Locked On crossover edition of Locked On Boilermakers and Locked On Cyclones. I've got Nick Marvitz of Locked On Cyclones here to preview this huge top 10 matchup game. And it's all here today on the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network, where it's your team every day. And today's episode is sponsored by our friends at FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets or college bets all season long. But Nick, I'm glad to have you here. This is a huge matchup between two undefeated teams. And how can you not love this one? Early December at Mackey Arena. What do you make of this matchup on Saturday?
My biggest thing with this is this is a great opportunity for Iowa State to kind of see where they're at. Coming into this season, we didn't know exactly where Iowa State was going to fall. A lot of people thought without Curtis and Keyshawn from last season, they were going to struggle offensively. It seems like that might not be the case. Kind of people had around 5 in the Big 12. Maybe that isn't the case. I think against a team like Purdue, we're going to get to see what we should have seen in the third game of the Players Era tournament. A real legitimate opponent. I think you guys are 2 in Ken Palm right now. How does Iowa State square up against a Purdue before the Big 12 matchup? Where's Purdue looking at, kind of as Iowa State? Because I think coming into this season, this was a big matchup, but not what it is right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one that I did circle in terms of going to be a tougher matchup in this non-conference, but right now, a top 10 matchup. This could be our toughest non-conference game outside of maybe traveling to Alabama, but it is a top 10 matchup. And for Purdue, this is a year with a lot of expectations. We got Braden Smith, Trey Kaufman Ren, and Fletcher Loyer, who I'm sure we'll get to later, but it's their last ride. They've experienced everything that there is to experience, made it to a national championship and fell just short. So the expectation for this Purdue team this year is kind of national championship or bust, and a huge test for Purdue at Mackey Arena. This is going to be Purdue's first top 10 matchup in Mackey this year, so it's going to be a fun one. We're excited to see what the Cyclones have to offer, but the Cyclones, they've been hot, and I talked to you about it before we got on the show, but you guys are coming off one of the top shooting performances of all time in your previous game. What was your reaction to that, and what do you think about this Iowa State team? How are they going to play Purdue going into Mackey Arena?
Just to answer your first question, the win over Alcorn State, I don't know if I've seen a score like that. And my reaction was just genuinely, is that the right score? Is 132 a typo? You know how the score bug starts to get a little weird once it gets into triple digits. Iowa State scored another 32 points once they hit triple digits. I could not believe it. I don't think that's going to be the norm. Obviously, Milan Momcilovic started the game 8 of 8 from 3. Ridiculous. Nate Heisey went 3 of 3 from beyond the arc as well. Iowa State shot the lights out. That was super exciting. And just because we're kind of talking about it, I have this right here. Iowa State's offense in this so far this season has an offensive rating of 122.8. Purdue so far has an offensive rating of 129.5. So Iowa State has been off the chain. This is unprecedented level of Iowa State offense, just because we're kind of known more as a defensive program, and Purdue is exceeding that. So to answer your question of what are we going to see from Iowa State in this one, I expect slap the floor defense to maybe the full court press type of situation. I don't know if it'll come down to full court press. It's not really something we see a whole lot from Iowa State, but I expect extremely hard defense. And I think a lot of that is going to come from Killian Toure, the freshman who I'm sure has made his way into your feeds. The kid is unbelievable. You're going to see a lot of Joshua Jefferson as well, but I think it is going to be Killian Toure. The question for this one is, does Tamin Lipsey play? If Tamin Lipsey plays and Killian Toure are paired up as that kind of defensive guard combo, I like where Iowa State's at. Without Tamin Lipsey, I have a few more questions, but I still feel pretty good about the defensive intensity, and then we'll see how the offense comes along.
When we talk about this Purdue team, what they kind of have to offer, it's not a team that's going to be incredibly fast, that's going to run you out of the gym with their pace. But what they do bring is a very efficient offense. They score more per possession than any team in the nation, one of the top teams when you look at the history of college basketball in terms of offensive efficiency. That's what this team is this year. And that's what they're going to want to do against Iowa State, is to be efficient with Braden Smith, with Trey Kaufman Ren, and to flat out rebound people. Oscar Clough, who is our center, he's averaging double-digit rebounds. Trey Kaufman Ren is averaging double-digit rebounds. When those guys play together, we're able to rebound the ball at a very high level, and then that offense starts to flow. So for Purdue, you want to win this game with your offense, with your rebounding. Would you say for Iowa State, they're going to want to win this game through their defense, through that defensive identity that you guys have started to build over there?
Yeah, I think it'll be the defensive identity and then kind of the rebounds, like the same thing you were saying, but offensively for Iowa State. You bring up Oscar Clough. I'm sure we'll talk more about him in the second segment because he was we were trying to grab him out of the portal this last transfer portal's kind of cycle or whatever. But Blake Buchanan has really come into his own. He's the guy who kind of filled in that role, and I think he's taken on the role of a Cyclone really well, predominantly in the rebounding game. Some of the stuff doesn't really show up on the stat sheet. You know what I mean? Like, it's just effort. Blake Buchanan has that. And I think that Iowa State's going to be able to compete on the boards. Defensively, that's something you can control. Iowa State can't necessarily control to a certain extent if they're going to shoot over 70% from beyond the arc or almost 80% from the floor. Like, you want to shoot very well, but you can't necessarily control that. Defensive intensity, they can control. And if I've learned anything from Otzelberger, they're going to control what they can control and let the game play out as it does.
So it's hard to look at areas where these teams are bad because both undefeated, Purdue #1 in the nation, Iowa State number 10. But I've talked about it this week. The only area that may concern me a little bit for Purdue is the turnover margin. They haven't necessarily been the best team at forcing turnovers defensively. We've done a decent job at not turning the ball over, but the margin has kind of been even. And I look at one of these games against an Iowa State or against a really good team where maybe you don't have that margin of error and that turnover issue that may hurt Purdue. I'm not saying that it will or it won't, but that's something that I look at and I say that's the category where Purdue could get beat for an Iowa State team that they haven't been exploited so far this year. What is one area, even though it may be difficult to do so, that you look at and say, this is something to look at for Iowa State fans? If Iowa State loses this game, this is going to be the reason why.
Yeah, immediately I go straight to rebounds just because I do think that that's going to be a key part of this one. In the turnover margin, I wonder if Iowa State will get the better of Purdue there. It seems like that's something that Iowa State's done a really good job of this season. Killian Toure comes back into the conversation. He's done a phenomenal job of poking the ball away and running down and dunking it right away. So we're getting points in transition there. We're turning the ball over live. It's not just out of bounds plays where now we have the ball. We're getting free points a lot this season. I think 27 turnovers against Mississippi State. So we've seen that so far this season. Back to Iowa State, I do think the rebounding thing is going to be probably the biggest area where Iowa State has struggled. But like you said, it's all kind of relative, right? Like, I don't think Iowa State has had a super weak spot this season. If I had to pick one, I'd probably go with, I'd say defensive rebounding, allowing teams to get too many second chance, third chance, fourth chance points. But I imagine Otzelberger is going to make that a very potent area of conversation this week. And if it's going to be one thing, it's that. But I'm not predicting that. Let's put it that way.
This term gets thrown around all the time, but I really do feel like we're looking at a potential game of the year here if it does live up to expectations. I'm sure that Mackey will be intense, and we're going to talk about all the players in this matchup here next. NFL Sundays move fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. And with FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. But it's not just for the NFL, it's for college basketball too. And a big one coming up on Saturday, Purdue and Iowa State. That line just dropped, and Purdue is a 4.5-point favorite. Whether you're a Cyclone fan, whether you're a Boilermaker fan, make sure you put in your bets before that game, or if you want to, hop in live on the action. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets or college bets all season long. FanDuel, The game moves fast, and so can you.
So when we're breaking down Iowa State versus Purdue, it's really easy to kind of look at program versus program, but we all know that this is going to play out with the players on the court here in this Locked On Purdue, what is it, Locked On Boilermakers, excuse me, Locked On Cyclones
hey, we're good.
Crossover here on the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Talk to me a little bit about this, Nick. What is making Purdue so effective offensively? On KenPom, #1 in all of college basketball with a 129.4 offensive rating. Ridiculous. I mean, you talked about it already, more points per possession than anybody. Who is making this happen? Is there one catalyst, or is it a whole team effort? Is it like 2011 or whatever Spurs, or is this closer to modern NBA ball? What does it look like on the Boilermaker side?
Honestly, kind of love that Spurs comparison, and let me tell you why. So I brought it up a little bit in the previous segment about those seniors, that being Braden Smith, Fletcher Loyer, and Trey Kaufman Ren. And those are going to be the guys that you look at. There are going to be a ton of supporting casts for this Purdue team this year. You got CJ Cox, Oscar Clough, Ja'Cory Harris, Meyer, who is a freshman, a ton of talent on this Purdue team. But ultimately, when you look at this team in March, when you have to look at the story behind the 2025-2026 Boilermakers, it's going to come down to those seniors. Braden Smith, he's on pace to break the all-time assist record that's stood there for 30 years by Danny Hurley. Right now, I believe he's averaging just over 8 assists a game. 8.9 assists a game right now for Braden Smith. And right now, his efficiency hasn't totally been there, so that could be something to look at. Braden Smith, he's a great scorer when he's on, but a different evolution of him this year. We're really focusing on getting his teammates involved, really focused in on racking up those assists. In terms of our leading scorer, Fletcher Loyer and Trey Kaufman Ren, those two guys right neck and neck. Fletcher Loyer right now at 15.6. He shoots the three ball lights out. If you haven't heard of Fletcher Loyer, 49% from three-point range so far this year. He shoots it a lot better at home than he does on the road. So that's going to be our guy where from three, Fletcher Loyer is going to hurt you. And then inside, that other big senior, Trey Kaufman Ren. He's taken a huge jump alongside Oscar Clough. Last year, he was at about 7 rebounds a game. This year has 11 right now. And that's courtesy of Oscar Clough. That gravity that he brings you off the boards, Trey Kaufman Ren has really taken a jump as a rebounder. And he's also right up there being our leading scorer. So if you're looking for who's going to hurt the Cyclones, who is going to try to compete against this Iowa State team, this offense is going to run through those seniors.
Interesting. Okay, for Iowa State, it's kind of the same in some aspects. I think seniors are very important to Iowa State's roster. There are 5 returners, essentially, really 4 that play a lot of minutes. Cade Kelderman on scholarship doesn't play a whole lot, but you're looking at, Milan Momcilovic, Tamin Lipsey, Joshua Jefferson, Nate Heisey are the kind of the 4 that play a lot of minutes. And when you bring up those names, 3 of them are averaging 18 points per game for Iowa State. Tamin Lipsey, Joshua Jefferson, both at 18.4. Obviously, we mentioned we don't really know what the injury status of Tamin Lipsey is right now. It's day-to-day. And then Milan Momcilovic, who went off last night or 2 nights ago or whatever it was against Alcorn State at 18.1. So those are kind of your predominant scorers, but also don't sleep on guys like Killian Toure or even Jamari Bateman, who had kind of his coming out party. Iowa State is very well-rounded, and I said this a lot last year, and I think it even reigns true for this season. This team is so talented across the board that you never know who it's going to be, but a lot of times it's generally 1 or 2 guys, and the rest of the crew feeds them, supports them. Once Iowa State figures out who's got the hot hand, they're allowed to play to that player. Everyone is ridiculous assist numbers, in my opinion. Obviously, their averages aren't crazy because it's not always the same guy dishing it out. But guys like Joshua Jefferson, who's averaging 5.6 from the interior, the guy has ridiculous court vision. They're going to get it inside to him because he can score. But if it's not his night, he's going to pass it off to Momcilovic in the corner if it's his night. So Iowa State is extremely deep talent-wise, and I think that I can't tell you who it's going to be against Purdue because it could be Nate Heisey, who has a ridiculous 27.9, and he's hero in Ames. Like, I really don't know. As far as defensively, we talked about rebounds, and I want to kind of center in on the bigs. Iowa State loves to talk about guards crashing the boards and how key that is to their success. But we talked about Oscar Clough, And he was a target in Iowa State's transfer portal cycle last year. We ended up with Blake Buchanan. If you want to compare those two, if you think that'll be a matchup, go ahead. But I think it's probably more likely to be, or at least the big name matchup is going to be Joshua Jefferson versus probably Trey Kaufman Ren is my guess. How do you see that panning out? Do you think Iowa State gets out physicaled? I don't think so, but I could see the Purdue guy having a different thought.
I mean, I don't know a team in the nation that Purdue can't out physical. And I'm not trying to disrespect Iowa State, what they can do, but I'm just so confident in this front court with Oscar Clough and Trey Kaufman Ren. I don't know if there's a better front court in the nation in terms of what they can do together when they're on. We have seen at times this year, mainly earlier in the season, they've been really hot as of late, but where that front court is a little bit clunky. However, what Purdue offers that not a whole lot of other teams can do is that past Trey Kaufman Ren, past Oscar Clough, when you have 22 plus rebounds combined between those two guys, you have a 7'4" center off the bench that can rotate in with Oscar Clough. His name's Daniel Jacobsen, redshirt freshman this year, but a really high prospect. Last year broke his leg to start out the season, but he's made 19 field goals in a row, the longest streak in Purdue history, stretching back to Rutgers in Eastern Illinois, who we've played. So he's hot. He can block the ball, 2.5 blocks per game. So that's where Purdue's going to get you. Yes, you look at Oscar Clough, you look at Trey Kaufman Ren, and they've been great for us. But the opportunity to rotate out Oscar Clough and Daniel Jacobsen, an elite shot blocker, and Clough, an elite rebounder. That's what Purdue didn't have last year that they do have this year, and that's why people are so high on this Boilermaker team. I know centers, it's going to be a huge matchup in that front court, but I did have a question for you in terms of that bench unit. Purdue, they take a lot of pride in their depth this year, especially with guys like Daniel Jacobsen. But what is that Iowa State bench going to look like? How many minutes is your starting lineup going to get? And is your team comfortable with having that bench out and playing extended minutes if necessary?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The bench is deep for Iowa State. There was a conversation against Alcorn State. People were like, why is Iowa State still piling it on? They're up by 60. They have 120 points. That was our bench. Our bench is just good enough to be able to look like they're piling it on against Alcorn State. Yeah, you're going to have guys like Jamarian Bateman, probably would be my guess. Dominic Nelson. They're going to come off the bench and they're going to contribute in kind of their own special ways. The way I see Dominic Nelson, he's a very downhill, will get to the foul line type of player, and he brings that intensity, even if he's not scoring the buckets, because I don't know what he is from the free throw line. I've got it right here, about 60%, yeah, right exactly where I thought he'd be, 60% from the line. So he's not shooting the percentage you would think a guy whose like main job is to get to the line would be, but it's the intensity factor, and that's what I really like about this Iowa State team. And I was going to bring this up with the centers too, like Blake Buchanan comes in from Virginia. And my biggest, like my most kind words for Blake Buchanan are that he has adopted the identity of the Cyclones. Like he is truly full effort all the time, sprinting back after dunking on somebody. Like you just don't really see that in a lot of programs. It's the same thing with like Dominic Nelson. So you bring those guys off the bench, the intensity does not waver throughout these games. Even if from the bench, you're not going to get the same production, which most teams aren't. Obviously, the elite national title caliber teams will get more production, but most teams, there's a dip because they're on the bench for a reason. Iowa State doesn't lose the intensity there. That is what I am most excited about from this team. As far as X factors, I have one, and he's a starter. It's Killian Toure. He's a freshman. Does Purdue have anybody that could step up to the plate that we might not have seen a whole lot from this season, or maybe someone that's unexpected, compared to the offseason? Where's Purdue at X factor wise?
Yeah, so I'm going to have a little bit out of the box answer for this. This guy isn't in our starting lineup. He's actually a backup, and his name is Jakari Harris. Jakari, he struggled to start out this year. A little bit of the same last year. Sophomore this year. He has some size. He can be a wing, also can be kind of that two guard for you if that's what you need from him. But last year struggled shooting the ball. And then as the year went on, he got comfortable within that lineup, continued to improve. When he's good, Purdue is a lot better for it because he brings you physicality. He can shoot the three ball. He can get to the hoop. He can do about everything for you. But to start out this season, during the exhibitions, he was amazing against Kentucky, against UND, had 20 points, was shooting the three ball really well. But to start out this year, he's shooting about 20%, about like 4 points a game. But against Eastern Illinois and Rutgers, our previous two games, he's had double figures in both of those games. So I think that Jakari Harris is getting a little bit more confident. I think that he's growing more comfortable on this year's team. And I wouldn't be surprised if we look to him coming off that bench and maybe he makes a few shots, makes his name known.
Interesting. Yeah, I wanted to go like with a guy like Milan Momcilovic for Iowa State, but I do think it's going to be Killian Toure, that young guy who nobody expected to have the role that he did. And yes, we've seen him see success this season so far, but I think in this one, he's going to have to step up if Iowa State wants to dominate. And I do think Iowa State's going to dominate, but I'm not going to say by how much because we're going to go over our predictions right here coming up just after this. But first, a word from our friends over at Aura Frames. The holidays are officially here, which means gift hunting season is on. And if you want something meaningful, personal, and guaranteed to get a reaction, Aura Frames is the gift that delivers every time. It's not just something you wrap, it's a way to share memories because Aura isn't your average picture frame. You can preload the frame with photos before gifting it, so when they plug it in, the memories are already there. No apps to figure it out, no setup headaches, just instant smiles, endless uploads of pictures and 30-second videos through the Aura app. And my favorite part, the packaging comes gift ready. No price tag, no wrapping needed. I'm so bad with the tape. That's a huge win for me personally. I know you're going to love it too. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver mat frames, named #1 by Wirecutter, by using promo code college at checkout. That's AURA frames.com, promo code college. This deal is exclusive to listeners and frames sell out fast. So order yours now to get it in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply.
All right, Nick, final segment of this Locked On crossover. I know we're going to get to those predictions, but I want to go ahead and talk about our kind of final thoughts surrounding this matchup going into this huge Saturday top 10 matchup at Mackey Arena. So we talked about matchups in this last one. We talked about X Factor. Is there a certain spot? And I know personally for me, it's that Joshua Jefferson, Trey Kaufman Ren matchup. Is there something that you look at between two guys and say, this is going to define this game?
Honestly, I don't know if it's between two guys as much as it's how does Milan Momcilovic perform in this one for Iowa State? I'm just going to be honest. Like Milan was told this offseason to shoot more and to shoot at a rate where you're going to make more just because you're shooting more, as opposed to Milan's always kind of been a guy shoot 6-ish times, make 4 or so of them at a high percentage. That's kind of been his thing. I want to know, does Milan stick to the shooting 10, 11, 12 threes in this game, or does he kind of shy away if he's not hot early? I'm not saying that's going to win or lose the matchup for Iowa State, but I do think it'll set the tone to some degree. The one thing that is kind of in Iowa State's favor, even if that doesn't go their way, just a few nights ago against Alcorn State, started the game down 7-2. Then they proceeded to go on like 160-30 run or whatever it was. It was ridiculous. So they don't have to start hot to win this game, but I want to see Milan shooting it consistently to show that Iowa State is loose. I don't want them to end up tight with the ball. Do you think Purdue could tighten up in this game? Obviously against a very tough opponent. I've seen some of Purdue's matchups, played teams like Alabama. So it's not like they're not used to the spotlight, but this is definitely a big matchup.
Yeah, so you bring up Alabama. That's kind of the matchup that I look at in terms of trying to put my thought process on this game. And the reason I say that, it's kind of unique, but what Purdue has wanted to do defensively to stop teams. We don't have the best defense in the nation, but we have an amazing offense and we can rebound the ball. But what we've done so far against top 15 teams in Texas Tech and against Alabama on the road is we've limited their number one player and made them go somewhere else. So against Alabama, LeBaron Philon, that was LeBaron Philon's worst game of the season. We also held JT Toppin to like 13 or 14 points, which is good for what JT Toppin traditionally does. Now, the concern I have against Iowa State, and the reason why I do actually think this is a tough matchup for Purdue, even at home, is because you brought it up. Iowa State has so many different guys that you can play through. Say we want to limit Joshua Jefferson. Well, there's 4 more guys that can hurt you on the court at any given time for Iowa State. So that is the reason why I feel that this is such a tough matchup. In terms of Purdue tightening up, I honestly think that they'll be ready. That's more of a thing that we've seen when Purdue has played bad teams where they'll go into it sleepwalking, turn the ball over, get into foul trouble. Against Alabama, against Texas Tech, They played lights out basketball, 2 halves of lights out basketball against Texas Tech, won that game by 30 in the championship of Baja Mar. So I think that this Purdue team is going to be motivated. I think that they're going to be ready to play. And I think that this is going to be a really good matchup. Do you think that Iowa State, I'm sure they are, but do you think they're going to carry that same intensity into Mackey Arena to play the #1 team in the nation?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I'm sure that Otzelberger is going to have his guys ready to go. And I'm not trying to be facetious by saying this. I will just never forget Purdue's loss to FDU and those kinds of, It's been a few years of Purdue having a lot of success in the NCAA tournament. And I think that's where a lot of people kind of think Purdue is. Like they aren't that good because we haven't seen these like crazy runs from them like we have from UConn. That's not the case. This Purdue team is very good, arguably the best in all of college football right now. And college basketball right now. And Iowa State has an opportunity to show that they're in that conversation going into this season. You know, I think there was, like I said, like 5th in the Big 12, maybe like an Elite 8 team at best. I think if Iowa State looks competitive in this one, I don't think they have to necessarily win. This is, after all, the beginning of December. If they look competitive in this one, I think this is going to answer a lot of questions of where Iowa State will fall in the Big 12, where they'll end up probably getting seeded. Obviously, it's a long season, and you have to play the games. That's why we play them. But this is a really good measuring stick for Iowa State. And it's a great game to get them ready for the Cyhawk game, which I know you're probably not too concerned about. You're trying to tackle this one. I'm sure the guys are one game at a time as well. But this is a wonderful opportunity for Iowa State to step up to the plate and to take on someone other than Alcorn State.
Yeah, we'll get to our predictions, but one more question for you. Kind of tell me about where Iowa State goes from here. Obviously, one game at a time. We'll talk our predictions, but outside of this game, win or loss, what is Iowa State what's their trajectory the rest of 2025 going into 2026?
Are you asking me, the guy who has all of this stuff on the back of my wall, or me, the analyst? Very different answers.
It doesn't matter to me. You tell me your take for the rest of Iowa State's 2025.
I say, if you're asking me, the guy who asked for this shirt for Christmas, they're winning the national title. I said this the other day. I said, is it too early to say that Iowa State's national champion? Because if it is, I'll wait. I'll just be thinking it until it's okay for me to say it. Like, I think that this team is so capable of breaking through what Iowa State kind of has had as far as a ceiling for a few years, Elite 8, whatever. I think they can absolutely get to the Final Four and be a few ball bounces away from a national championship. We'll see how it plays out. Like I've always said, the Big 12 is the best conference for basketball, and I'm shocked that you're even like pushing back on that. I feel like,
hey, we got 11 teams potentially this year. I think historically, yes, but the Big 10, I don't know if there's a conference better than the Big 10 this year.
Well, Iowa State's going to play Iowa, and they're probably going to beat them by 50. So, I mean, there's a direct comparison. We'll see. But I feel very good about where Iowa State is at. Even if Purdue chokes this one away and looks like Alcorn State this weekend, where do you think Purdue goes the rest of this year?
Well, I don't know about that one, but ultimately, this game, it's going to be a big test for Purdue, and I really do think that they can run the table, go undefeated through the rest of non-conference play if they can win this game. Rest of your opponents through non-conference play going into January. Minnesota at home, which is a conference game, but Auburn and Indianapolis, technically neutral floor, not really. You also have Marquette, which has not looked like Marquette at all this year, and you got Kent State in there. So all of those matchups you should win. There's no doubt about it, but this is the one at 4.5. That spread from our friends at FanDuel, it's probably going to be the closest spread the rest of 2025. And that's why I say it could be the most important game that Purdue plays to this point for sure, but maybe even going into the rest of the year. Real potential for the game of the year here. I'll go ahead and let you give your prediction first. Do you think Iowa State covers plus 4.5? And do you think they win outright?
I think they win outright. I think they cover the 4.5. I would say, man, I don't know. The way we're talking about this kind of makes me think this is like the middle of the road scoring affair. I don't think this is going to be like a defensive battle. I also don't think this is going to be a 130-point showdown. So I'm going to say Iowa State wins it somewhere in the range of, they've been scoring a lot more points than I thought they would this year. I'm going to say 94-86. It ends up kind of falling away with free throws at the end of the game. I feel okay with that. Where do you have it at?
Yeah, so honestly, I think that the home court advantage is going to be a big factor for Purdue. I feel a lot more comfortable that they'll be able to win this game as to oppose it playing at Iowa State. I think that Mackey is going to be a factor in this one, and I do think that Purdue is going to cover. I think that they'll win by about 9 points, keep it a 3 to 4 possession game. I'll call it 83-74 Purdue.
Okay,
They get that one. Stay undefeated on the year, but of course it could go anyway.
Don't forget this. This is something we haven't even talked about. Crazy. You guys play the Juicy Wiggle thing. You think this is like your thing or whatever? No, it's going to pump the Iowa State guys up. So maybe get to someone in broadcasting, whoever's in the production there, say, hey, maybe we don't play that and pump up the opposite team here, huh?
We'll have to see. I don't know if I have that much pull quite yet, but we'll see what we can do with that one. But it was a fun crossover. I appreciate having you on. I'm sure that we'll have another chance to do this down the road. Thank you, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, if Purdue makes it out of the round of 64, I would love to have this conversation again.
Buddy, we'll see about that one. Thank you, Nick. If you guys are new to Locked On Boilermakers or haven't seen Locked On Cyclones yet, make sure to subscribe to me. Make sure to subscribe to him. We're pushing out great daily content on the Locked On Podcast Network, whatever your team is, on that #1 sports podcast network. Thank you, guys. Have a good one, and we'll talk more Saturday.